Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can we go ahead and have a roll call vote, please?
Yes,
Or
we can.
Not a roll call vote, pardon me, a roll call.
Yes, Director Cote,
Here.
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Zimmer,
Here.
Chair Ohilski.
Present. Okay, so item number 3 is board member comments. Do you have anything on brief comments, provide project status updates, or communicate with other directors, staff, or public regarding non-agenda items?
Nope.
No. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull an item from the consent agenda? Okay, there's 2 items on the consent agenda. Item A, which is the approval of the minutes from the May 20th, 2020 meeting, and the approval of the warrants, budget update, and the invoice register through June 2020. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Last chance. Okay, we'll go to public comment on this item. Do we have any public comment, Laura?
If you would like to make a public comment and you're on your computer, please raise your hand. And if you're on your phone, please dial *9. Again, that's raise your hand or dial *9. There's no public comment at this time.
Okay. All right. Can we have a motion then to approve the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
We have a motion. Was that by Charlie? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly.
That's Bruce.
Okay.
S&T will second the motion.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion. Let's just take a roll call vote quickly, please.
Director Cote,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Chair Ohilski.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Ohilski. This is Dan Hummel, the Executive Director for the BMC. I will keep my Executive Director's report very short today for a couple of reasons. One, we've got a pretty full agenda of BMC topics, and 2, there weren't a lot of significant updates from the previous month's Executive Director's report. So obviously, though, however, if the directors on the board have any questions, feel free to ask any as follow-ups. But the primary updates that are included in the executive director's reports really are associated with the updated numbers regarding recycled water and effluent disposal. One additional washing machine rebate since our last report under the water conservation item. And then finally, just an acknowledgement under the cannabis and hemp category that the water management plan for the proposed cannabis cultivation operation was shared with the BMC Board of Directors. And so those are the only items with updates in this month's Executive Director's report.
Does anybody have any questions on this item? Okay, I guess we'll go to public comment then.
If you'd like to make a public comment on the director's report, please dial *9 if you're on your phone or raise your hand if you're on your computer. Okay. All right, Jeff, you're able to speak. You just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for your help with that. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I have a few brief remarks in connection with the ED report. First of all, with regard to accessory dwelling units, you might note that yesterday the Board of Supervisors did take action on amendments to Table O of Coastal Framework for Planning. And so that's been accomplished. At this juncture, the board action will move on to the Coastal Commission for final consideration and action. So that's been done, and you might update the ED report accordingly. Secondly, I'd like the committee to note that the May deliveries of treated wastewater to Sea Pines exceeded 12 acre-feet in 1 month. And I will comment about this later, but I have considerable concern about continued deliveries to Sea Pines when there is little to no seawater intrusion mitigation as a result thereof. It's my view that that water needs to go to the Broderson recharge location. Broderson is expected to push water through the clay lens and allow the movement of water from zone C to the lower confines of D and E. If we reduce or redirect flows that would otherwise go to Broderson, that would otherwise go to Broderson, we're going to prolong the time needed to determine whether Broderson is going to be an effective place to put water for purposes of pushing water through to the lower aquifer. The mound is developing, as I understand it, but a lot more water needs to be placed there to actually build the mound high enough to create the head to push the water through. So I think we need to be singularly focused on getting Broderson to produce. And deliveries to Sea Pines, I think, are misplaced. As far as the hemp and cannabis, there is now a hemp ordinance, but my main concern is the West Coast or Wild Coast Farms cannabis proposal. And I would ask this committee to agendize that matter for your consideration, discussion, and action. It seems to be languishing here, and I think this committee needs to take a position. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, any other public comment?
There are no other public comments at this time.
Okay, then at this point, we'll go ahead and receive and file the executive director's report, and then we'll move on to the action items. The first item in the action items is item 6A, the draft land use planning documents presentation. The recommendation is to receive a presentation from county planning staff on the draft 2016-18 resources summary report, the growth management ordinance, and Los Osos community plan. Review the draft program, UNC sustainable yield update technical memo, and provide direction to staff. So Daniel, it's up to you here.
Thank you, Chair Ohilski. Yes, so this is an item for the BMC to receive a presentation from county planning staff. And so I'll be turning it over here shortly to Kylie with county planning staff to provide a presentation on the land use planning documents. And then we'll follow up that presentation and any comment and discussion with just a summary of the TM that Cleese Harris Geologists provided regarding updated sustainable yield estimates for basin plan programs UNC. And so at this point, I would turn it over to Kylie, and I apologize, Kylie Hensley with SLO County Planning for her presentation.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Hi, thank you. So attempting to share my screen with all of you. Laura,
You should be able to share your screen. I'm not sure why it's not letting you.
it says that host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can just send you my PowerPoint.
Could you please? I'm sorry about that.
Sorry, I should have sent it to you as a backup. One moment. Thank you for your patience.
Isn't that what's in the staff report?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, well, we can just run through that, I think.
Okay. Laura, would you be able to share your screen of the agenda packet and navigate to page,
Attachment 1, page 1.
yes, exactly. Attachment 1, page 1. Thank you.
I'm opening. It'll be 1 second.
All right, thank you.
What page is it on in the PDF?
24.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Dan. My name is Kylie Hensley. I work with the County Planning Department in the Long Range Planning Division. I've been working with Carrie Brown, a planner who's also on this call, on the Los Osos Community Plan Update. And today I'll be presenting about planning provisions related to the Los Osos water supply. So the stipulated judgment, the basin plan, and the Basin Management Committee do not restrict or modify the county's land use decision-making authority. However, county planning must consider the available water supply in the following land use planning documents: in a resource summary reports, in our growth management ordinance, and in the Los Osos Community Plan standards. Planning referenced the Los Osos Basin Plan and annual monitoring reports for the most recent information, and we'll also incorporate the updated technical memo prepared by Cleith Harris that will be shared after this presentation. And the Basin Management Committee may comment on draft land use planning documents. Either individual members may submit comments, or the committee may submit comments as a whole. It's up to you to decide the level of comment that you would like to provide. However, please keep in mind that as these planning documents, some of them need to go to the Coastal Commission for approval. So having an official comment letter from the Basin Management Committee might be beneficial down the line. Next slide, please. So these land use planning documents reflect planning's understanding from the Basin Plan that 6 programs are recommended for immediate implementation to meet existing demand and allow for marginal population growth. Program M, the groundwater monitoring program, is in place, and there's ongoing annual reporting. The Urban Water Use Efficiency Program, which is 99% complete. The Urban Water Reinvestment Program, which is in place and will be discussed more in Cleith Harris's technical memo. The Infrastructure Program A, 1 expansion well remains to be constructed. Infrastructure Program C, 1 expansion well remains to be constructed, and 1 sounds like it's being deferred. And then a wellhead protection program. So overall, the status: these programs recommended for immediate implementation are not complete. At least 2 expansion wells remain to be completed, and your committee has the authority to make modifications through adaptive management or revisions to the basin plan. So I'd like to call attention to table 46 in the basin plan. The basin plan estimates that marginal growth would be allowed if water demand is less than the target goal of 80% of the sustainable yield being used for production. In 2019, the production was estimated at 1,900 acre-feet per year, which is less than the demand projected in the basin plan, with programs E, U, and AC completed. So as you can see in Table 46, assuming a water demand of 2,230 acre-feet per year and a sustainable yield of 3,000 acre-feet per year, all three basin metrics shown, the basin yield metric, the water level metric, and the chloride metric, are projected to meet target goals. So for the basin yield metric below 80, the water level metric above 8 feet, and chloride metric below 100 milligrams per liter. If the Basin Management Committee does not intend to proceed with completing these 6 programs, or intends to pursue alternative programs, this information would be helpful to know as planning finalizes these land use planning documents and updates them in the future. And the memo prepared by Cleve Harris is speaking to this request, I believe. And the basin plan also identified potential programs for build out. So the Los Osos community plan that is currently going through the public hearing process proposes increase in dwelling units and other uses of water as well. The basin plan identified the following programs that could be completed to accommodate build out water demand that have not yet been initiated. Infrastructure Program B, the Community Nitrate Removal Facility. Infrastructure Program D, constructing additional wells to shift production inland. Agricultural water reinvestment to reduce agricultural pumping, and supplemental water. Note, the basin plan does not recommend supplemental water based on the principles outlined in the basin plan and any provisions adopted through adaptive management. This table shows a projection of which combination of basin plan programs would meet the target goals for basin metrics based on estimated build-out demand and estimated sustainable yield for the different program combinations. As you can see in this table, the basin plan programs B, so that would be Infrastructure Program B, the Community Nitrate Removal Facility, and Program G, the Agricultural Reinvestment to reduce agricultural pumping with treated wastewater, would meet the target goals for basin yields, water level metric, and chloride metric. This is based on the original estimates in the basin plan without any modifications. So that was summarizing planning's understanding of the basin plan and the different programs assessed in the basin plan. Now moving on to the planning documents. So in our resource summary report, this report assigns level of severity to different resources and is intended as an alert system to the Board of Supervisors. It is not a policy document. This report assigns a level of severity to a water supply based on the time frame for the remaining estimated dependable water supply based on forecasted demand. In coastal areas such as Los Osos, there's a level of severity 1 assigned if there's 9 years of remaining supply for the forecasted demand, 7 years of remaining supply for the forecasted demand would result in level severity 2 designation. Then level of severity 3 is the highest level of severity, and it indicates that existing demand already equals or exceeds available supply. The revised 2016-2018 Resource Summary Report conservatively recommends a level of severity 3 for the Los Osos groundwater basin plan area water supply, because the 6 basin plan programs recommended for immediate implementation are not all complete, and annual monitoring is verifying program effectiveness. This level of severity may be revised down as programs are completed and depending on monitoring results. And the Board of Supervisors approved the resource summary report in last March, but they extracted the District 2 portions of the report and asked staff to update them, specifically the Los Osos section, to reflect the data in the most recent annual monitoring report. So that's why these revisions are being brought at this time. This next slide talks about new development in Los Osos. Currently, the wastewater treatment plants cannot serve undeveloped parcels based on conditions of the treatment plant's coastal development permit. There's currently a wait list to receive building permits for 215 single-family units and 130 multifamily units. This wait list has been in place since the 1990s. There's an average of 2 new dwelling units per year that are issued construction permits outside of the sewer service area. So there has been relatively low new growth. Once the Los Osos Community Plan and the Habitat Conservation Plan for Los Osos are adopted, the wastewater treatment plant may serve undeveloped parcels that are on the wait list. And once the Growth Management Ordinance Amendment is adopted, no new development would be allowed except exempt dwellings. Exempt dwellings include affordable housing, ADUs, agricultural worker dwellings, and replacement dwellings. Just a bit of background, the Growth Management Ordinance is Title 26 of the County Code, and it sets growth rate limitations for new dwelling units in the county. The county can assign specific growth rates to communities based on resource constraints. Next slide. The restriction on new development would be in place until basin plan programs recommended for immediate implementation are complete, as discussed previously. Once those programs are complete, the ordinance requires, the proposed growth management ordinance requires the Board of Supervisors to adopt a resolution signifying that those programs are complete. And then there would be a 1.3% growth rate for 5 years for new dwelling units in Los Osos. And there would be no restriction on non-residential growth. This is estimated to result in about 82 to 86 new dwelling units per year. 11 would allowed outside of the sewer service area, 71 allowed within, an estimated annual increase in about 12 acre-feet per year in water demand. By year 5, an estimated 421 new dwelling units and 63 acre-feet per year increased water demand. This growth rate would allow, theoretically, all of the waitlist dwelling units to be built out by the end of year 5. And then as new basin plan programs were implemented, and if the committee developed additional criteria for new development for planning to consider, the growth rate could be reevaluated. To be changed, the process would be amending Title 26 of the County Code, which does not require Coastal Commission approval. I'm receiving public comment until June 26th to be included for consideration in the staff reports. Additional comments may be submitted until the dates listed on this slide. Comments are welcome, as I said earlier, from both the committee and each of its respective members. The dates currently scheduled are Planning Commission on July 9th for the growth rate and community plan. Board of Supervisors on August 11th for the revised resource summary report and an introduction of the growth management ordinance, and Board of Supervisors on August 18th for the growth rate and community plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. That was very informative. If it's okay with Chair Ohilski, I would provide a brief presentation on the updated TM from Cleve Harris, and then we can move to discussion. Okay. To account for changing conditions and additional data that the BMC has obtained since the development of the base plan in 2015, the Los Osos CSD had requested that Cleve Harris geologists, the hydrogeologists for the Los Osos Basin Management Committee, and that prepares the annual report and has done a lot of the historic modeling, prepare an updated sustainable yield estimates and demand calculations for programs U and C specifically, which Kylie referenced in her presentation. And so shown on the screen here is a summary table of the information provided in the Cleve Harris technical memorandum. And I'll walk through the committee. I'll walk the committee through this. So as described, the sort of through adaptive management, the vision for program C has been modified to only include 2 expansion wells. But that has an impact on the estimated sustainable yield of the basin. And then the other significant change to the sustainable yield estimates includes reduced water available from the recycled water project for discharge at Broderson. And so taking into account these 2 factors, Cleve Harris geologists prepared the updated maximum sustainable yield estimates shown in the 3rd column of the table being presented. And in effect, reducing the maximum sustainable yield estimate from 3,000 acre-feet per year to 2,810 acre-feet per year. When taking then into account the 80% of the maximum sustainable yield calculation methodology for the basin yield metric, that reduces the available water, estimated available water, to 2,250. Then moving down the table shows a comparison of the demand estimates from the 2015 basin plan with updated demand estimates based off of data collected over the last 5 years. And the upshot of that is an observation of a reduced urban demand from original estimates of approximately 130 acre-feet per year. The demand estimate of 750 acre-feet per year for agricultural is retained to provide capacity. So then a total demand of 2,100 acre-feet would yield, when comparing to the estimate of maximum sustainable yield of 2,810, would yield a basin yield metric of 75, which is below the target of 80, and translates into the term marginal available water supply of 150 acre-feet per year, which is slightly lower than the 170 acre-feet per year calculation that was included in Kylie's presentation, that utilized the numbers and estimates from the 2015 Basin Plan. Additionally, Cleve Harris provided updated estimates for the water level metric and the chloride metric at the bottom of the table. And those remain unchanged from the metrics identified in the Basin Plan of 8 feet for the water level metric and less than 100 milligrams per liter for the chloride metric. And so it's recommended that the BMC provide these updated yield and metric calculations to county planning for incorporation into the draft land use documents going forward to the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors, and the Coastal Commission here over the next series of months, as Kylie laid out. And that concludes, I believe, the presentation from county planning staff and the executive director. And again, the requested input on this item was for the BMC to receive the presentation and review the updated metrics and provide direction to staff on how to proceed relative to the draft land use planning documents.
Mr. Chairman, if I might. Bruce. I don't know where Mr. Ohilsky has gone to. I don't know, Mark, are you there, and Charlie?
Yeah, I'm here, Bruce.
Okay, I don't know where Marshall, I don't hear, but we're getting down to the real deal here in terms of trying to move the community plan forward. And I appreciate planning staff's interaction with the other staff and members of the BMC in getting this teed up, because as you can imagine, water supply is going to be an obvious issue in framing up the future development of Los Osos. I was thinking, I saw the recommendation to provide a letter of recommendation prior to the Coastal Commission. I think it might be useful to provide input at each of the 3 stages upcoming. The Planning Commission coming on July 9th, and the board sometime in October. And in both of those places, I think it would be useful for the decision makers to have input from the BMC to be sure they understand the level of effort that this group has done to stabilize and sustain the water supply that's going to be so key to the future of Los Osos. So, besides transmitting these safe yield estimates, perhaps some of our standard language about the nature of the programs and the commitment of the BMC to, the requirement of the BMC under the court's order to manage the basin for all users in a sustainable way, I think is going to be an important piece of information for those that are going to be considering this plan and its related documents in the near future.
Yeah. I agree with you, Bruce, and I'm trying to, obviously the county's done a lot of work and there's a lot of information in the planning component of this, which is something that Golden State really doesn't dive into, at that thoroughly as we're going through it here. But I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it and also know some of the constraints that Golden State has. One of the things that concerns me is the presentation talked about the intent on completing the programs, and I see that
two of the big ticket items that come to mind are the wells, A and C, and one of the wells will be deferred as we're talking about in the updated estimates. And then I believe the district is going to be doing the second well for program C. And so that part of it will be completed. It's the program A well that I'm trying to look to see exactly what that well consists of.
Well, wasn't that in the executive director's report? We're waiting, we've gotten the draft approval for the money to complete that. Isn't that what I understand, Dan, from your IRWM section of your executive director's report?
I thought that was.
That is correct. Yeah, that well has been drilled, and it's my understanding that the CSD is waiting on the grant funding to come in to equip that well and be able to put it into service. So it's largely complete.
I'm sorry, Dan, so that's the program A well?
Correct.
That is I believe we were discussing the program A well, yes.
Okay, so once that funding is approved, then program A will be complete?
That is my understanding, yes.
And then program C will be complete with the drilling of the well that the district is reviewing right now, right?
Yes, I believe under current adaptive management, program C includes 2 expansion wells, one which Golden State has already completed, and one which the district is in the process of identifying a site and then constructing.
Dan, if you would like, I'm not sure where Chairperson Ohilsky is, but Ron is available to speak on that if you would like him to.
Well,
yeah,
that's
I think
I'm just trying to get the projects and kind of reply back to, one of the key statements was the intent on completing programs is dependent on some of these planning documents that the county's working on. So I just wanted to make sure we fully understand.
So that conditions our growth management ordinance on moving forward with growth in Los Osos. And I think there are a couple of things. If you look, the way it's drafted right now, and it's not complete right now. The proposal is to move forward when 6 programs. I think, and Kylie, correct me if I'm wrong. Is M, the groundwater monitoring, the urban water efficiency, the urban water reinvestment, program A, program C, and program P for wellhead protection. And most of those are complete. I mean, are nearly complete. I don't think the distance to go to get all of those 6 complete is not far, except for the drilling of the second well under program C, or maybe it's the first well, the expansion well under program C. And so I think that's not unreasonable. I think we might take a slight bit of nuance into the question of completing program C. Program C has done a certain amount already, and we have a safe yield, and we're operating at less than the 80% of sustainable yield currently without the program C well that we've been hearing about a bit. And the county can decide what it's going to propose. It obviously has to go through Planning Commission, Board, and Coastal Commission. But I don't know that we would necessarily. We can have the discussion as to whether growth rate is 0 until that expansion well is completed or not. We can decide how much marginal water is available for marginal growth under the current situation of program C. And I think we can craft the growth management ordinance to to respond appropriately to the increase in sustainable yield as different aspects of Program C and other programs are completed. You know, and I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm just really trying to grab a good handle on what programs would be left, and really determining funding for those programs. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is that the funding is there. We just need to complete the projects, which may take some permitting and things like that, a little bit of time. Otherwise, I'm under the same assumption that we are close to completing those programs, as mentioned.
And I would be interested in hearing from Ron about the latest on the expansion well under Program C.
I'm here.
Yeah, this is Marshall. I'm sorry, I got disconnected. I don't know what happened, but I'm back.
Good.
Would you like me to continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, we're having we have 5 sites identified. We have the environmental work underway to do a co-equal analysis and constraints analysis for each site. Our plan is to hopefully have that work completed and a staff report in front of our CSD board in August, probably September at the latest, to select a site. And then we'll continue through the environmental work, the mitigated neg deck, and other things we'll have to do to move towards permitting. So we're moving along slowly but surely.
What do you think would be the earliest you could get the test well permitted and drilled?
Well, the location of the well will probably determine the involvement of the Coastal Commission. One is in an area that's not appealable, the other is. So I'm not sure at this point. My hope is by next summer.
Okay. And do we have, I just don't have it right in front of me, but do we have a number for sustainable yield in the basin? So updated, we have the memo from Cleve Harris updating program U and C that dropped the sustainable yield a little bit. Do we have a sustainable yield number without the expansion well drilled at this point?
I don't have the numbers, but we used a conservative number in that memo from CHG, that 2810. Mm-hmm. I think it would go down by, and I'm just around 80 acre feet. I think that's the yield, if the conservative estimate in that yield. Spencer may be on the call.
I saw him there.
Laura, could you unmute Spencer?
Spencer, you should be able to speak. I have him unmuted, but he might just be listening through speakers and not have audio connected.
That's highly likely. So anyway, to answer your question, Supervisor Gibson or Committee Member Gibson, I believe it's around 80 acre feet that was used in that yield projection.
That's what the expansion well would raise it by?
Yes.
Okay.
It's somewhere in that vicinity.
Kylie, okay.
I'm sorry, this is Mark with Golden State again. Just to provide additional feedback and comments. I try to understand the position the county's in for the growth and ordinance and some of but ultimately, this is once new customers become customers, they're now customers that we have to serve no matter what. I would like to take a little more of a conservative approach than trying to push it to the limit of what our theoretical yield is, and have a little more certainty with confirmation of the program effectiveness and the data from the matrix coming back to us, that from Golden State's, our main fundamental priority is for our existing customers to make sure these customers have a reliable and affordable source. And if we add more users onto the basin without a high level of certainty, then we're taking a risk there, and have to evaluate that risk.
Mark, I mean, I guess the question I have to ask is that my understanding is that Golden State is giving out will serves at this time, right? I mean, two things. One of them is we've gone through this basin planning process so that we have a sustainable basin, sustainably managed basin to provide for the needs of existing customers. Plus, we're operating the basin at less than the desired metric of 80%. I mean, 80% metric, staying under the 80% of maximum sustainable yield, is conservative in its, on its face. And so what the analysis has here is, a clear sense that under reasonable analyses of the yield that is provided by the projects within the programs that we've had in front of us for a very long time, that we're going to be able to provide this water. And our annual updates, part of our adaptive management plan, has borne that out. Mm-hmm. So I'm having a hard time reconciling. My understanding, again, is that Golden State denies no one a will serve letter if they apply, even as we speak right now. And so, I've been trying for quite a while to get the activities of this committee synced up with the county planning process, and we're on the threshold here, and we have an analysis that shows we can do this. So I'm not quite sure what the objection is.
So you're correct. Golden State, we don't have any land use authority that lies with the county, and hence that's the reason why we can't deny a can and will serve letter. That would need to go through the county permitting process for land use. So, the other mechanism for that is the, historically we've had the wastewater moratorium in place. The other mechanism, to discuss if it's going to be all hinged on water is a moratorium that would allow or inhibit the can and will serve process. So if Golden State was able to dictate whether they could give can and will serve letters or not, we would be superseding the land use authority there. So that's just the fundamental basis of where we're at. So as far as with the basin and our goals, when we were developing the plan and the metrics, it was really based on a 10-year projection of we were going to implement these projects and review and analyze the effects of these projects over a period of time. And so that's kind of really what my thought was, that we've implemented a substantial amount of projects and have made some great strides in a short amount of time. And I think that the planning documents are saying that we're not going to implement development right away, that we would wait until all the projects were completed, but really didn't want to put it on that. I would rather put it on more of confirmation of the metrics, and that what we've done is right, because
we have that. We have that confirmation.
Let me just conclude real quick, if you would. So, before we put more users on the basin, I think that there may be additional work that the purveyors need to do to meet existing demand. If we add additional users on there, we could be compounding the problem even more. And so,
I mean, Mark, how can you say that when we're operating at 75% of the yield of the basin? We've been consistently down around that level. What evidence is there that more work needs to be done to sustain existing users? That just doesn't make any sense to me.
well, I think looking at the metrics and the data and confirming that we're at least moving in the right direction. I know we have the yield and the goal, and that's our target, and it's great that we're operating below that level, but have we seen those results? It's gonna take time to confirm that is the yield is correct. I mean,
we have how many years of annual reports showing that we're using less than 80% of our calculated sustainable yield. We have water level metrics that are going up. We have chloride metrics that were going down substantially and have taken a little bounce back up. That's probably due to the well leakage stuff, but that's on the path. We got the nitrate metrics that's starting to show a bit of a trend down, but fundamentally from the yield metric, that's been stable. That hasn't gone anywhere over a number of years, and I just do not see where there's a case to be made that somehow we're over pumping the basin. I defer to Spencer that we're mismanaging the basin is what I meant to say. And I would defer to Spencer or Dan or one of the technical experts to suggest that I'm missing something here.
well, I'm not saying we're mismanaging it. I think we're doing a great job at managing it. I just, and I'm not objecting to the proposals. I'm just raising a level of caution. What I was hearing before is that we were gonna authorize development even before this program C was we were just talking about that. So
I don't see that it's not this committee's role to authorize development. This committee's role is to provide the basic information that's necessary for the county to properly execute its land use authority. And so the proposal before us is to complete these six programs, most of which are very close. The completion yields an estimated safe yield, which goes to our metric, which shows what we might have available for marginal available water for future growth. And the county comes in with, I think, a very conservative proposal over 5 years to use that marginal amount very carefully at a slow growth rate. This committee doesn't decide whether growth happens or doesn't, but I think that this committee can help the process by making clear the information that we have developed over these many months and many dollars that we've all spent in one fashion or another, to give the decision makers comfort that we know what we're doing in terms of managing the water supply here.
Yeah. So I agree that this committee doesn't have authority for development, but also the water purveyors, or at least Golden State, is not going to commit funds to development water through projects through this committee either. So I just want to really just stress the first and fundamental priority for us is our existing customers and to have long-term reliable and integrity for the water basin. And so what I've seen is marginal improvements on the metrics, and I would just err on caution of not moving too fast and making too many assumptions when authorizing new development.
I think that's the key here, and I think that's what we're doing. You know, Marshall and Charlie, I'd be interested in your perspectives on this as well.
Yes, if this is Charlie from S&T. Thanks for letting me speak here for a moment, giving you guys a break. I think S&T, I can speak for our shareholders and our board from conversations we've had at many meetings. We sound, I believe we're lined up with the Golden State position on this. We're concerned about, we continue to be concerned about providing good water to our existing population here. And I just like to say about the basin yield metric, the definition of the basin yield metric in the basin management plan defines 80% basin yield metric as the minimum threshold, safe threshold for supporting the existing population over the basin. So I don't want there to be a misunderstanding, and I think we all understand that, but I think that as we discuss this, we are just moved just underneath this 80% safe threshold. We continue to have some problems, some of which aren't even part of basin metrics. And one of those is the realization that high concentration nitrate water from septic effluent is leaking now into the lower aquifer and causing nitrate concentrations in important areas of our lower aquifer to rise to the point where some of our production wells will have to be shut down as those get up to 10 parts per million. I know Golden State has a well like that, as does S&T's production well is threatened by this. And so our community water source is still threatened by problems in the basin. And that problem in particular is something that's not even represented in a basin metric. I'd like to mention one other thing, and I don't want to dominate the discussion. This is going to be a long discussion, I have a feeling about. And first, I'd like to thank Kylie for all the work and county planning for all the work that they've done. And I've read through these documents, and we are at S&T, we're formulating a response. I want to talk about this terminology, available supply, as it's used in the county planning documents. And also now I see it here, used here in this slide up in front of us called marginal available water supply. Available supply is an interesting concept for coastal groundwater production, because these wells, the western wells in our water basin, have essentially an infinite access to water. What's defined in the English language as water. The quality of that water is important. As we pull on this water, we'll end up eventually having seawater in our wells, perhaps, or high nitrate concentrations as we create a gradient that draws water through the regional aquitard that is polluted with high concentrated nitrates. So I just like to say, I just searched the basin management plan for the term marginal available water supply, and I don't see that mentioned anywhere in the basin management plan. So eventually I'd like to have that defined. We have some figures here. It's beginning to look like a metric, and I'd like a definition for what that means. But in general, just as for the purpose of this discussion, S&T Mutual Water Company is really largely in agreement with Golden State Water on this position, that we're concerned that in our present situation, the way it is today, we consider our community's water supply at risk. And we are a little concerned about the county's race toward what we perceive as the county's race toward lifting of the building moratorium. I'm going to leave it at that. I have some more comments for later, but I want other people to have a chance to talk.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm gonna let Ron talk a little bit, but I think that the CSD is pretty much supports what Mark's position are here. You know, the 80% is just being met now, but there's other metrics that are not being met. So Ron, can you have the technical expertise that I don't have. So can you add a little bit to that, please?
Yes, can you hear me? I think I'm unmuted.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Yes, you know, we've had some internal discussions on this, and I want to make it clear that the CSD isn't advocating for growth or no growth. It's really for sustainability of our population and the future moving forward. We have the same concerns that Mark's expressed and now Charlie, that we need to move forward cautiously and be careful because once we move forward, there's really no turning back. So as Mark said, you start adding new customers. We are now committed to serve those customers. And if the basin metrics change or the trends on the basin metrics change, we'll be in a tight position to be able to provide for the sustainability of the community moving into the future.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, so where are we going to go with this discussion?
Well, you know, my point is, and why don't we take public comment and then we'll come back to the deliberations.
All right.
Another comment before we go to public comment, if that's allowed.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Cody from S&T Mutual Water Company. Just as a continuation of the expression of our concern at our water company for the high concentration nitrate water leaking through the regional aquitard into the lower aquifer, which is in particular the source water for S&T Mutual Water Company. Our water source is threatened by this, and the county planning department continues to permit septic systems in the very high density septic leach field systems up at Cabrillo Heights. We are going to recommend that the county cease providing permits for septic systems, at least in the Cabrillo Estates area where it affects our community water supply. It's threatening our community water supply. But perhaps I would like the Basin Management Committee to consider an agenda item for a future meeting to discuss the possible recommendation for a moratorium on any new septic permitting anywhere over the Los Osos water basin. And perhaps even a movement toward connecting existing high density septic systems that are in areas deemed outside of a moratorium area, connecting those to the wastewater treatment plant. Many of those existing permitted septic systems are very close. They're 100 feet, 200 feet, 250 trenching feet to a connection in an existing sewer pipe. And I really don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that, especially in light of the report that was part of an agenda package for this committee back in December last year that indicated the threat of these septic systems to lower aquifer water sources in the Los Osos Basin. So I'd like to have an agenda item. I suggest we have an agenda item to discuss this at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, Laura, do you want to go to public comment, please? I just want to make everybody aware that I'm going to have to leave the meeting at 3:20. So, Chuck wasn't able to attend the meeting, so I'm only here for another 40 minutes. Okay, Laura, let's go.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you're on your computer, please raise your hand. I do have some questions that were asked, that were typed in. The first one was somebody inquired if the speakers could please identify themselves before they speak. So directors, if you could just please say your name before you speak, that would be a huge help. This one is from Christopher Gardner. He wanted to know if Bruce Gibson was aware of our seawater intrusion going down and inquired where it was in the report. From Meg, she said, are the existing private wells included in the calculations? And then from Lynette, it says, neither the LOCSD or Golden State have land use authority. So why does one issue will serves and the other one does not? And then let's see here. Jeff, you're able to speak.
Thank you, committee. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I'm a little surprised to see the purveyors making a case and really conflating new development with basin management. The proposed amendments to Title 26 of the Growth Management Ordinance for residential development limit the maximum number of units to 1.3%, as you've heard from Ms. Ken Hensley. I'm not sure what the concerns are about a trickle of development in light of what I will correct you folks. We have a 69 basin yield metric now in accordance with the 2019 annual report. So we're well under 80%. As an aside, the programs that were mentioned, there were 6 programs that need to be completed. A, P, C, M, E, and U. And I've heard almost no discussion about program E and the ability for additional conservation. Your former executive director has laid out, Rob Miller laid out, calculations that provide for anywhere from 150 to 250 additional acre feet of savings. That's a water supply. So you have these additional savings that have not been included in any math that I've seen, including this updated basin yield estimate matrix. So Title 19 is an existing program, and at this juncture, any new development would have to comply with Title 19, which requires a 2-to-1 ratio of savings or conservation to use or demand. So I think the purveyors are way out in left field and missing the point here. Moreover, in connection with this updated basin yield estimate, I think the average urban demands, which do include both the urban purveyor demand as well as the rural demand and the community demand at 1,350 acre feet, I submit to you that that's high by probably at least 100 acre feet or more. So this discussion is entirely confusing, and I think the purveyors really need to look in the mirror and figure out what their purpose is. I do support the 1.3% growth management level or growth rate, but I do not support the level of severity 3. I think we are clearly within a level of severity 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, Laura?
There's no other public comment at this time.
Okay, so we'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee for discussion.
Well, you know, Mr. Chairman, it's I certainly respect the mission of the water purveyors to provide for their customers. I understand what you're saying. What I don't see in evidence right now is a imminent or even a remote threat to the water supply. I mean, if we want to talk about the long-term viability of the water source, first, it would seem to me that should have been something we have been talking about for quite a while, and we've put in management means to deal with this. As to the threat of nitrates contaminating the lower aquifer, yes, we have a memo that's in the December packet, but I don't see in that memo any suggestion that the drinking water supply of the community of Los Osos is threatened by that. And so, if we need to revisit that to understand the magnitude of that effect, sure. But and the extent to the extent to which it's down gradient of Cabrillo Estates is something that we need to understand more of, and I think that's that's well understood in the framing of this memo. But I don't see that particular piece of information, which I was aware of, but which did not rise to the level of an existential threat to our ability to provide water in this basin. I think that we need to look at the whole of the management effort here, and it would seem to me that we well, I'm a little bit of a loss here, because the metrics have been heading in the right direction. The yield metric has been stable. We are under adaptive management as a operating principle here, and all three purveyors have have been updated on the county's path toward getting this long-awaited land use plan in front of the decision makers. So I believe that the county staff has laid out a very conservative, slow growth rate that explicitly acknowledges adaptive management and a reference to the annual monitoring that this basin goes on. And so I would think it appropriate, and if we need to delay a specific letter till later in the process as it gets closer to the Board of Supervisors, let's do. But the issues before this committee today have been long in the making, and I would hope that as a matter of service to the constituents that are mutual between the three purveyors and the county, that we are able to show our ability to support the plans that the county's long in the process of having put together.
Laura, are you there? Laura.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so there's a question and answer. Christopher Gardner said he thought his hand was up. Can we let him speak?
I will go ahead and unmute him. Christopher, you're able to speak.
Very much, appreciate that. It does seem like, thank you for letting me listen in on this. Mr. Gibson, you said that the purveyor's role is not to develop water for, that our committee's role is not to approve growth. And I can understand that, but I also don't think the committee's role is to provide water for development in the county. And I know that Mr. Edwards would like to see some development here, but I think the purveyor's job number one is to provide a safe, reliable drinking source for their current constituents. And while that little percentage of 1.3 doesn't sound like much, when you look at those other numbers, it just seems like we're now on the right path. And already, can't we let it take for a while and see how it goes? I don't really see the metrics that you have that all the nitrates and are going in a proper direction. It seems like we're on the right path. I think there's more work to be done, and I know there's pressure to develop. But that said, I don't think the purveyor's job is to meet the county's demand on housing or growth. I think the purveyors know their position, and I'm glad they're following it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Bruce had his opportunity to speak. Who would like to go next? Mark, Charlie?
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just really, I guess one of the things, Bruce was mentioning about the documents, and one of the documents we just looked at is the RSR document and the severity level 3. And that definition, is that it equals or exceeds existing supply. And so there is a document that's under the county's list of documents that does favor a little more caution than 1.3% seems like a small amount, but when you look at the actual number, I think it was 80 plus home or 80 plus connections, which on an annual basis will add up quickly. So willing to work with that and provide any kind of input we can to help support the county on their effort. But with some limitation and understanding what our role is. So appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you. Charlie?
Yes, I also would like to take a more conservative approach to this. I believe that the numbers are looking good. We are just a hair below the 80% safe threshold for basic yield metric for supporting the existing population in Los Osos. And I am optimistic that we can improve on that. At the same time, I don't agree with Director Gibson in the sense what he says that no water supplies are currently threatened. Well, that's not true. S&T's community water supply is threatened, and I think that we may not be the only place. There are several other lower aquifer wells that are threatened by this leakage of high nitrate water into the lower aquifer in various locations around the basin. And I think that you should review that memo, the technical memo, and I believe that the Basin Management Committee should revisit this often as a threat to our community water supply, this issue about leakage through the regional aquitard. And I'll let somebody else talk.
Okay. All right, thank you. I don't really have anything additional to add. I think that the CSD's position is that we have to be conservative to make sure we have sustainable yields to serve our existing customers. And I think that's the position of all three purveyors at this point. So how do we want to proceed here in providing comments to the county on this document?
Well, S&T will provide our own individual critique, and I think each one of the purveyors should do that. But I would like to see, this is Cody from S&T, I'm sorry. I would like to have an agenda item for this committee to discuss a joint letter that we can present to the county with our opinions about a conservative approach to growth.
So is your idea that each purveyor creates their own letter, and then after each purveyor has drafted their own letter, that we bring it back to the committee to come up with a consensus of what the committee would agree to?
Well, our board at S&T, this is Cody again, our board at S&T has asked me to present our concerns and comments on these county documents. So I have direction from our board of directors to do that. I suppose that they might be open to S&T participating in quorum with the Basin Management Committee on a joint letter. And I don't know that that means that we shouldn't also write our own individual letter, but I definitely think that the Basin Management Committee should provide some directional opinion about these issues about build out.
Okay, so Mark, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think we should provide a response from the Basin Management Committee. In addition, Golden State hasn't confirmed whether we will be providing individual comments at this time, but following this meeting, I'll talk with our staff and see if that's something that we want to move forward with. But I think definitely a response from the BMC is appropriate.
So Bruce, when did you say this is going to the Board of Supervisors?
Well, the hearing before the Planning Commission starts on July 9th. And I'd be grateful to see the individual comments of the water purveyors as soon as possible. As you know, we are finalizing a staff report for that hearing, you know, having based it on the conversations of the BMC to date. Again, I would submit that what's put forth here is a conservative approach in terms of utilizing the resource in front of us. But I would also suggest that another agenda item for this committee should be, if indeed one or more of the purveyors feels that there is some significant threat to their water supply from nitrate contamination into the lower aquifer, I think we need to revisit that because that was certainly not the conclusion that I took away from the consideration of it back in the December meeting. And so if we need to understand that a bit better, I think that an agenda item to come to a mutual understanding of exactly what that threat is and how big it is fundamentally important.
Okay. So it sounds like each purveyor is going to proceed on their own and then get the comments hopefully to the county so it can be incorporated into the Planning Commission hearing. And then the BMC will weigh in between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors hearing, if I understand correctly. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I think that if you excuse that, that's not a bad approach, given that the Planning Commission will be considering all the necessary information and making a recommendation to the board.
Yeah, Kylie would like to have the comments in, she said, by, I believe, the 26th of this month.
Right.
Which is sort of an impediment for the BMC getting together at another meeting. It would require a special meeting for us to approve a document.
Yeah, I just think I think the better approach is just to have the purveyors provide the comments to the Planning Commission and to staff, and then us respond to what the Planning Commission's findings or discussions were prior to the Board of Supervisors hearings. So look at it as a process rather than you know, a drop dead date kind of thing. So what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. I think really, you know, what we need to do is just confirm the BMC program elements and the status of the numbers and really stay away from a position on the growth ordinance. I think that's something that we could put together fairly quickly and easily. just with the staff. And so what was your suggestion how are we going to implement that? Did you have a suggestion for that?
No, my suggestion was that the purveyors comment to the county by the 27th, so that can be incorporated into the planning commission hearing. And then after the planning commission hearing, based on their input, or pardon me, based on their discussion and their recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, that the BMC weigh in on their recommendation prior to the hearing by the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes the best. This is Mark again. I think that makes the best sense for timing.
Okay, so is that an approach that everybody's going to agree to?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we're done with that item, unless anybody wants to talk a little bit more about it. So then we'll move on to, and again, I'm going to have to be leaving because I had a last minute doctor's appointment, nothing earth shattering, but so the implementation plan approach, what we talked about in the past was basically coming up with some sort of structure where we could have basically, collaborative effort between all of the purveyors and the county. So we could prepare an implementation plan for the BMC. It's something that we've talked about multiple times. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, but basically the idea would be, now that we have some direction and we've had a discussion about the planning document, and once that goes forward, then we'll be able to sit down and come up with a strategic plan, which is what the implementation plan basically means, is a strategic plan. So Daniel, I probably took everything away from you to talk about, but go ahead.
Marshall, just real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but do we want to deviate from our agenda item and move to the annual report 6C, just because in case this discussion goes long, we can still approve the annual report?
Well, you guys are going to continue the meeting once I leave. So either way, if I'm not on the call anymore, Ron can talk for the district as far as the strategic plan, whatever you guys want to do.
I would concur. Let's jump to the annual report so that you can vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we'll move to 6C. So Daniel, you want to talk a little bit about the final report?
Thank you, Chair Ohilski. Dan Heimel, Executive Director. Yes, I think we can keep this item hopefully pretty brief. This is a presentation of the final draft 2019 annual report for the BMC review and approval to submit to the court. Additionally included in this item is a request to, and Laura, if you could go to the next slide, to consider modification to the current process for reviewing and submitting the annual report. The current process includes 2 steps, presentation of a draft at a BMC meeting, and then approval of the final at a subsequent BMC meeting. On the next slide is a proposal to streamline that a review and approval process to include presentation of a draft at the BMC meeting, and if upon determination that there are no significant issues or comments that need to be further addressed, the BMC could authorize staff to prepare and submit the final report. If significant issues are identified, then the final report would come back to the BMC for final approval to submit. So looking for approval of the final report and a direction from the BMC on the approach to future review and approval procedures.
Okay, does anybody have any comments before we go to public comment?
Yeah, this is Cody at S&T. I'm sorry to bore you with my continual kibitzing on this issue about the process for the annual report, but I'm concerned that right now, it seems to me that we're racing through the process of creating, editing, and approving an annual report as it is. If anything, I'd like to move the deadline. I'd like to change our adjudicated agreement to change the deadline for submitting the report to give us more time to do that. I think that it's the importance and value of this report and the time we spend on it is worth a better review process than we have now. And I'm concerned about short-circuiting that by essentially moving it to a consent agenda item in a draft form.
Okay, can we go to public comment? Because I'm going to have to leave, but I can rejoin. But can we go to public comment, please?
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you're on your computer, please raise your hand. All right, Jeff, you're able to speak.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I do not support any change in how the annual report is prepared and reviewed by the public and submitted to the court. Thank you.
If there's any other public comment, please dial *9 or raise your hand. There is no other public comment at this time.
Okay, so I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we go ahead and approve and submit the annual report, because I'm going to have to leave for a while here.
I'll second that.
We can talk about process later, but right now, I'd just like to see that we submit this on a timely basis.
I'm in support of the motion, and also that we discuss the process later.
Okay.
This is
Can we
Mark.
go ahead, I'm sorry. Okay, can we take a roll call vote, please, Daniel?
Yes, Director Cote,
I'm in a meeting, just a moment.
Director Cote,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Chair Ohilsky.
Yes. Okay, that concludes that discussion. Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. Hopefully I'll be able to rejoin while I'm in the car. But if not, this will be the end for me. But anyway, I had to step away. I had a doctor's appointment come up at the last minute, so I apologize. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark, and then I'll try to rejoin from my car.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. So we're going to jump back to agenda item 6B, implementation plan approach. And I'll turn it.
Thank you, Director Zimmer. Dan Heimel, BMC Executive Director. This item is to review and provide direction on the proposed approach to preparing an implementation plan. The current terminology for what was, I believe, described at the last meeting as the strategic plan is described in this staff report for this meeting as an implementation plan of strategic objectives. I was still open to input, but just to sort of hopefully make clear what is being proposed. And so what is outlined before you is a process or an approach to developing an implementation plan to assist the BMC in performing a comprehensive evaluation of water resource initiatives and utilizing that process to be able to prioritize its time and effort towards implementing the basin plan programs and other water resource initiatives. And this approach was developed through collaboration with BMC party staff, and I'll walk through it quickly here. The first step would be just documentation of roles and responsibilities, reviewing the relevant formational documents or governance documents for the BMC and documenting any prescribed roles and responsibilities for the BMC. Then the second step would be to develop the list of strategic initiatives. It identified in the first bullet is some examples of strategic initiatives for consideration. This list would be developed based on input from the BMC staff. And then additionally, summary sheets would be created for each of the BMC initiatives as a quick reference to help BMC staff, parties, public, directors quickly access information that summarizes what is envisioned and included in each of the initiatives. Then the third step would be development of a scoring and ranking criteria. And this would be a combination of effort from the executive director and BMC staff. Then the criteria would be utilized to evaluate the strategic initiatives, to develop that prioritized list. Then the effort would be documented in an implementation plan technical memorandum and presented to the BMC, currently targeted at the September meeting. And the final slide shows an overview schedule of how that process could lay out in time, and some potential BMC meeting dates to illustrate potential opportunities for the BMC directors to participate in that process. And so looking for input and direction on the proposed approach and or alternate direction, as well as input on how the BMC and the directors may or may not want to be more directly involved in the process.
Dan, this is Charlie from S&T. Can you yield to me?
Yes, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, I thank you, Dan, and thank you to the staff for all this work. I support this effort, and I look forward to the results. I think that this looks like a big improvement in the methodology, and I look forward to getting through the process. And a lot of this process that I see here is actually still to be defined. And I appreciate that. I understand why that's necessary.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, this is Bruce, I agree. I think it's well laid out. I think the time frame is suitable. I know it's gonna, it looks like quite a bit of work compressed into you know, a mere 3 months, which I think is admirable. One question that I had was the cost of this. Is this going to incur extra cost? And if so, how much? And just make sure that we have a clear way of budgeting it. County, you know, the county has some suggestions, but I'd be interested in what you think about what this is going to take to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I had that same comment about the extra cost, so we could talk about that a little bit. You know, one of my thoughts is between item 2 and 3, when you shifted in 3 to the scoring and ranking, that we look at, I believe 2, I don't know, I don't have that slide in front, but we were talking about the existing use component of it. But if we could have a section there where we define what is needed for existing users of the basin and what is needed for new development or build out, may help. And one of the things is that to kind of contribute to that is the fact of, you know, we've been discussing different options for how to spread the cost of BMC. And so maybe there could be a component of that somehow I think that there's a way that new development should pay or contribute to funding of some of the projects that would help our expanded use of the basin. And so kind of trying to dive into that aspect of it and get an understanding. I don't have the answer to it, but it would be a great accomplishment to come out with an end goal of what would be equitable for existing users to pay to manage the basin, and what would be equitable for new users or new development to pay for contributing projects that would help us utilize the basin's full potential. And so I thought that the place that would go in would be between 2 and 3 on your roles, your strategic initiatives. Yeah, and then in number 3, you shifted to scoring and ranking. So somewhere in between there, having additional information would be helpful. So I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment now. I don't know if we have any hands raised or not.
If you'd like to make a public comment, please dial *9 if you're on your phone, or raise your hand. All right, Jeff, you're able to speak.
Thank you, committee. This is Jeff Edwards again. And this item 6B is troubling to some extent. This committee's been meeting for over 5 years, and it appears you have lost your direction. We need to apply the KISS principle to this, gentlemen. Keep it simple. The idea of having your ED go through this process, whether or not it doesn't cost any money, and it is done in 3 months, is ridiculous. In a half an hour, prepared, I called it a draft memorandum. It's an outline of your basin management programs and your initiatives. You all should have a copy. This is not rocket science. We are arguing over minutia and details that have at best a peripheral impact on your decision making. I'd encourage you to look at my list, and this is the list I would ask you to bring back at your next meeting for discussion, so that basin management members can weigh in on priorities. It's not that hard. We know, for example, conservation is #1 in the basin management plan. Yet again, and I sound like a broken record, but where is the conservation component? It's absent of any discussion. And that is, again, #1. The other miscellaneous items, monitoring, wellhead protection, that's easy stuff. But let's get down to the basics. We need 3 things. We need additional conservation, we need a second program C well, and we need a creek discharge. Let's make those the priorities and figure out how development can pay the lion's share of conservation and the creek discharge, which should end up anywhere from $8 to $10 million, which is entirely a manageable amount. But let's not protract this matter. Let's not make it more complicated. Let's not pay more to staff to do this. Let's move. I'm extremely disappointed with the lack of understanding this committee appears to have. Do your homework, gentlemen. Thank you.
There's no other public comment at this time.
You guys are fucking.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the board. Dan, I don't know if you want to comment on any of the comments that were made. One thing I would like to add, just on top of my comment where I was talking about adding a section in between 2 and 3, is that we did take a stop there and bring it back to the committee, because one of the goals that I had when we were talking about this input plan approach and was that we do come to a consensus on the roles and the responsibilities. And so I think it before getting into item 3 and going through a scoring and ranking and criteria, that we did have a stopping point and come to an agreement point at that time. So just wanted to add that in there.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might spruce, I guess let me see if I could wordsmith your thought there just slightly. I'm concerned about a stopping point. I expect as we move through this process that we'll get updates to the committee as we move, and I take that a lot of this effort is going to be interactions between our executive director and individual members of the committee and our staffs to line these things out. Just to be clear, my question to Dan was specifically on the cost of developing this implementation plan. And I think what I heard you, Mark, say is you're interested in the cost, some kind of cost estimates and some means of how we pay for the individual projects that get ranked. Do I have that right in what your interest is?
Yeah, this is Mark. Yes, that would be a component of it. But what I was really interested in when I was trying to add in a section between 2 and 3 was that we come to a consensus on what is the obligation of existing users and what projects or what activities would be considered new development or new use of the basin or expanded use of the basin.
Yeah, and I think I think that's appropriate. I think that's why we broke out Program A from Program B and Program C from Program D. I think that was the rationale there, and it's appropriate because we do need new development to pay its share of the cost of developing the resources for it, and that's absolutely understood. I think we're in an interesting place where the sum total of the programs we've had underway are blurring those lines a little bit, and that was the nature of that discussion as to whether there's marginally available water under the programs that were really first instituted to provide stability to the existing users. And I think that's a reasonable conclusion. So I agree with that analysis. Let me suggest, though, that and you're saying let's factor the cost of these into the ranking. I would think that that's absolutely an aspect of ranking. Was that within, Dan? Was that within your vision of what was necessary in analyzing the various strategic initiatives in ranking?
Yeah, cost was definitely envisioned to be one of the criteria under which each of the initiatives would be evaluated.
Okay. And Mark, what I know Golden State, each of the different purveyors has a different challenge with the question of cost. And I think a lot of the discussion that we have here, comes down to money. Who's going to pay, right? Existing or future development, which purveyor is going to pay what? What's the county going to pay? Those are, the matter of money consumes a tremendous amount of time. Let me suggest that we try to get these tasks in the implementation plan accomplished without necessarily finalizing the actual who pays what. The broad principles of existing development versus future development, that's probably an easier one. But the actual discussion of, if we have a project ahead of us that's going to need funding that is going to benefit the entirety of the basin, I want to get the projects in front of us in terms of their importance to the basin and their feasibility, which definitely includes cost, but not delay getting those projects in front of us for want of trying to work out all the details of exactly how that cost is going to be borne. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce, this is Charlie from S&T. I agree with the majority of what you're saying. I'd like to add about not just the cost, but definitely the cost is very important to the purveyors and S&T, but the logistics of the timing of those costs. And this is something that I think, Dan, it isn't included in your memo for item 6B, but part of the purpose, I believe, of this implementation plan approach is also for the Basin Management Committee to come to terms with some appropriate budgeting system and timing so that the purveyors or the members of the committee can, in a timely way, appropriate and budget for the costs that they're going to fund. Right now, we're still talking about, we're uncertain about the total costs for 2020, and we're halfway through the year 2020. And I can tell you that S&T is very concerned about cost overruns. We've already budgeted a certain amount of money to spend in 2020. And I think that the present situation, not just the amplitude, the magnitude of these costs, but the timing of them and the predictability of them needs to come under control.
So, Mr. Through the chair, Dan, would you like to comment on some of the issues that have been put forward here?
Yes, yeah, I would. Thank you, Director Gibson. With respect to cost allocation, the comment from Director Zimmer, this was discussed a little bit at a staff level, and yeah, identified that the cost allocation should definitely fit into this process. I think as Director Gibson described, though, fully finalizing cost allocation for each of the strategic initiatives likely could be a challenge, but that identifying contributing agencies to the specific initiatives or contributing parties in general could be one of the components of those summary sheets and the specific initiatives themselves. So if the contributing parties are envisioned to be new development, then that could be clearly identified. If the contributing parties are envisioned to be all of the BMC parties or the purveyors, all of those could be described in the summary sheets associated with each initiative. With respect to the Director Cote's comment regarding timing, yes, the relatively aggressive schedule presented here for the implementation plan is intentional with the desire to help the BMC get out in front of the budgeting process. I think as we went through the calendar year 2020 budgeting process, there was an identification of some sequencing issues and an inability for BMC parties to plan as individual agencies for potential upcoming BMC initiatives. And so that is a good point, Director Cote, is the intent of trying to get out in front of that, have this implementation plan well on the way in September, and use that to guide the development of the calendar year 2021 budget. And then in terms of the cost for the implementation plan itself, the goal was to get input from the BMC as we just have, and use that to inform the level of effort that the BMC would like to see for the development of the implementation plan. The goal from the BMC staff is to really streamline this process as much as possible, with respect to documenting roles and responsibilities. It's not a develop a mission statement. It's leveraging existing information and guidance for the BMC. but it is going to be an additional initiative that wasn't included in the original vision for the calendar year 2020 budget. So there could be an additional cost associated with implementing this plan, or developing this implementation plan.
And when will we know the cost, or at what point will that cost be revealed to the board?
I mean, I think there's been sufficient input, assuming we can settle on a process, to put together that cost. It's really not envisioned to be a significant cost. It potentially could be completed within the contingency amount that the BMC approved, which is, I think the total contingency was around $15,000. It likely wouldn't cost more than that based on the input that's provided.
From the
proposed approach.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, that would be that. I think that's a target we should shoot for. I mean, this is a bit of an added project, but I think an important one for us. Could we talking to my colleagues on the committee, could we reasonably direct staff to put together a process here? And I'm fine with the process with Mark's addition, with Charlie's observation about the budgeting focus and things like that. I think the process is well thought out. I think the aggressive timeline is important, so we don't let this dangle. We need to get this on the table and get it done and start working on it. Could we direct Dan to put together that process with a target of doing it within contingency? And if there's some reason why we don't think he doesn't think it can be done within the contingency budget, that he come back to us as soon as possible to let us know what that looks like.
I'm pausing because I'm thinking about it. I wasn't prepared to approve an expenditure or vote on that. But I mean, that was really why I was hoping you have a target date of September, I believe, to be done with this project, which I agree. That's a great, I want to keep it moving quickly. I anticipate we'll have a BMC meeting before then, right? Is that the intention of the group? Is that we will have a BMC meeting before then?
Should.
Yes, from S&T, yes.
Yes.
I mean, could we? I would like to understand. I just don't want to repeat. We have done this work, and we've done it with Miller. We've looked at these costs, and I just don't want to have to repeat that work again, especially if there are no new projects on the table. It's just going to be more of reprioritizing them or restructuring them and things of that nature. What I was really hoping to get is this, that we confirmed what our commitments are going to be. And I don't think that that's a large effort to do. We bring that back before our next meeting, and then we vote on authorizing that expenditure. I don't believe that we can even authorize that expenditure without Marshall here or his alternate either.
And Mark, that wasn't my intention. It was to give Dan the focus that the general desire of the committee to get it done within contingencies, and obviously we need to take a formal motion properly agendized to do that expenditure, but it was just trying to target it at contingencies.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too.
Well, I believe we have, this is Charlie from S&T. We have a quorum here, and I understand that the CST is not represented right now, but this is an agendized discussion point. I think it's legal for us to take a vote with a quorum on an agendized item. discussion.
It is, Charlie, but we were agendized to review and provide direction. So that's to me that, and I think it appropriate to let Dan have some time to think about exactly the scope and cost of what's envisioned here. I mean, our direction, we can certainly take a vote to direct him on things.
Yeah, and that's what I think we should do at this level right now, would be to direct Dan to move forward with the initial component of his work here, and then come back before the next BMC with a more formal project cost estimate and line item for those costs, and then we'll approve that at the next meeting.
Okay, I misunderstood. This is Charlie again. I thought that perhaps the part of the recommendations were for the BMC to provide authorization for staff to initiate the implementation of this plan. I thought that perhaps there was an argument that we couldn't do that today.
No, I mean, to me, I think we can get going, have Dan get going on it, and let us know the cost as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay. I think that's what we should do too.
Well, then I would, if it requires a motion, I'd make a motion that we provide this authorization.
And I'll second that, and just ask Dan if is the direction of the committee clear?
Yeah, I can reiterate. My understanding of the direction is to initiate the very beginnings of this process, but to come back with a more formal cost estimate to the BMC for approval before advancing further down the road in developing the implementation plan.
Correct.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Very good.
Very good. All right, we're jumping, we've already covered 6C, we're jumping to 6D, update on status of basin infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Director Zimmer, Dan Heimel, Executive Director. This item hopefully can be pretty short. This is normally a standing item on the BMC agenda, and we moved it to the end because there aren't really a lot of significant updates to discuss. If you review the table included in your agenda packet, I've used a formatting technique of underlining any new information, and really the only, and it's not even necessarily new information, it's just an update to this table regarding Program U, and just describing that currently both the creek discharge program and the urban stormwater recovery projects are on hold pending the outcome of the implementation plan initiative. I guess the other thing to point out, this is also a good reference for current status of the Program A and C wells that we discussed earlier. And in hindsight, maybe we should have kept it in its normal order at the beginning of the action items.
Cool.
Okay, I'll open it up to board comment.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, one of the, Cody, do you have any comments on this or no?
No, I really don't. There's some personal tasks for my water company that are pointed out here, but those are just my own thing. I don't really have any comment.
Okay. Yeah, the only comment I have is that on updating Program A and Program C, I think we kind of clarified those, that Program A will be complete. And then Program C, one of the things that's still out there is the Lossos LOVR water main upgrade. That project's been deferred. I believe that that's still under the deferment with, since we will not need the third well, we also won't need this project either. There's actually two of them on there regarding the water main on LOVR. And so both of those projects would be deferred due to the fact that we're not doing the third well. So that would be my only comment on Program C.
And related to that, if I could, Mark, we probably should, as a BMC, officially notify the county that expansion well number 3 is not now considered necessary to accomplish the goals of Program C.
Okay.
Just so they know basically what an updated Program C looks like. And if that water main's part of that, that would be true.
I guess this is Cody at S&T. I will make one comment about Program A. The S&T water meters were installed in 2010 and 2011. Thank you, Bill Garfinkel and Dave Tolley for doing that and the guidance of what had become the BMC. Today, we're replacing the near field radio endpoints on those meters. We have a crew working today and tomorrow to replace those with cellular endpoints. And this is actually a move toward a conservation program that we have had several incidences, as so have the other two purveyors, of large water leaks, including this year we had a water leak at one residence that drained an entire water tank, 120,000 gallons of water through a leaky irrigation system at one residence. These cellular endpoints will allow us to avoid that. We'll get an alarm for that real time now when that's happening. So I think there have been several people talk about conservations and efforts, and since we're doing this is a significant effort and cost for S&T to do this, and that should be done for our next meter read at the end of this month.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I'll open it up to public comment at this time.
If you'd like to make a public comment, please dial *9 if you're on your phone, or please raise your hand if you're on your computer. Again, that's *9 or raise your hand. There is no public comment at this time.
Okay, hearing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board. I think, Dan, at this point, you have direction to update the infrastructure projects as discussed?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the items on our agenda. I think the next thing we need to do is schedule our next meeting.
We have to take public comment for items not appearing on the agenda.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'll open it now to items not appearing on the agenda.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. If you are on your computer, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Our next public or BMC meeting, do we have a date for that, Dan? Were we planning to do one next month, or was this going to go to August?
The next regular scheduled BMC meeting would be July 15th. Regarding discussion earlier about the land use planning documents, it likely would be valuable to have a meeting on July 15th to review the findings from the Planning Commission and provide direction for next steps for how the BMC wants to approach the documents going to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and plan that meeting for July 15th, our next BMC meeting.
Okay.
And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
All right, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Charlie, Dan.
Yeah.
We'll see
Thank you,
guys.
everybody. Have a
Bye now.
great day.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye.